Alright guys, welcome back to the next part. So this time we're going to dive right into...
Hey, I'm Twitter Man, but you can call me the best gamer ever because that's pretty much what I'm known for.
What is happening? Why is this happening again? I just got rid of the last one. I don't need... This is way too specific. No!
Yeah, I played every Mega Man game blindfolded without health enabled. I know more about the lore than anyone.
I literally can't deal with you. You need to go. I don't know where you came from, but you need to leave. Right now!
Get good, scrub. Lol.
So we're gonna ignore the peanut gallery, at least for the moment. He's gone quiet for a bit.
Are you gonna review Mighty Number 9? Because GBA and Fune made it, and you have to include it in your retrospective because I said so. Hashtag simp.
Why? Why would I include that? Why would I? That's the ridiculous question. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, okay? Okay, yes, it is loosely based and is a spiritual... No, it's... I would literally rather eat broken glass. How about that? Okay, so I was a little miffed on how to proceed because, admittedly, I don't quite remember which of these games I played first. I know for a fact that I bought Battle Network 5 before I bought a Zero game. But I'm pretty sure I played Zero 2 before I bought Battle Network 5. If that makes any sense. So, I'm gonna call it like this. Battle Network and Star Force, for that matter, are in their own separate canon. They are a completely different universe from all the games I've talked about so far. All the games I've talked about so far are in the same universe, as well as Zero and ZX. So, I think it makes more logical sense to talk about Zero before I get to Battle Network, simply because at least it's in the same universe, and yeah, that to me that's more logical. So we're gonna assume that I played this first, and they were about the same time. Who cares at this point? It doesn't matter. You want to hear me talk about Zero?
Douglas, you really should have started with the first classic series because people on the internet have word comprehension problems and don't understand a story that's not told start to finish.
Yeah, I don't know why I keep expecting people to think or be logical at all. I don't know what I was thinking. You're right.
So have you seen Pulp Fiction and are you gonna review it?
Okay, so Mega Man Zero is technically a sequel series to the X series, but it gets hazy because, like I said when I talked about X, X5 was supposed to be the last one and then it was going to jump to Zero. But because X6 was thrown into development without telling Inafune, he had to kind of rewrite the origins or whatever he planned for Zero initially. It all ties together now, where one of the endings in X6 has Zero get into a pod and go to sleep. Basically, he submits himself to study, because he realizes he's been the source of the Maverick virus, and there's a lot they don't know about him. But he figures if they can analyze him, maybe they can find a way to counteract the virus, since he's immune. That makes sense. It still works. So, in any event, our plot starts out in the distant future, where there are rebels, and there's an overarching evil empire that is now controlling the world. Neo-Arcadia! Which, believe it or not, is helmed and led by a tyrant by the name of Mega Man X. Yes, that X. Oh, I'm sorry, no, it's not that X, it's a copy of X. The real Mega Man X actually is currently deactivated, and now he exists as a cyber elf who runs around and helps you out for most of the games. ZL, the lead supporting protagonist, finds Zero and reactivates him and enlists his help to find off the Neo-Arcadians, who are doing all sorts of horrible things, and the cover of trying to uplift humanity, but Copy X is out of his mind, so that's not really what's happening. And this plot actually gets really serious. I would argue that in many ways, the Zero series has the darkest Mega Man plot out of all the games. There's plenty of dark moments, particularly in the X series, as well as ZX, to be fair. But I think Zero is the one that's consistently serious. Any kind of camp or jokes or laughing moments from, like, the classic series really doesn't exist here. There are a few humorous moments to try to mix things up, but for the most part, this is a very serious take on the overall lore, set in a very serious post-war situation where people are really scrounging for survival, and the Earth really is not in a good situation. You play as Zero, the legendary hero Reploid, and he is pretty awesome. The gameplay is alarmingly similar to Mega Man X, to the point that it almost really isn't its own series, but there are some differences. You do have your dash and your wall slide, and Zero has his Z-Saber, as well as a Buster Gun, which seems to be just a handheld pistol, actually, which is interesting. But you can charge it just like you normally would, and Zero also gets an array of different weapons to utilize. One of the key differences, I think, between Zero and the X series overall and how it plays is that the weaknesses are here, but they're handled in a much odder way. To begin with, you can get powers from the bosses you defeat. That is true. However, every game has a different condition that has to be met in order to actually receive this power. Sometimes they're called EX powers, sometimes they're not. I don't really understand the difference. We're just talking about the boss powers. I'm trying to simplify it for you, because I want you to try to experience these games in a somewhat blind way, which is also why I try to avoid spoilers when I talk about things. I will tell you things that I think are important, things that most people would already know or be able to figure out from not playing the games for that long, but for the most part, I'm gonna try to keep this as mute as possible because Zero's story is excellent. It's probably one of the best stories told in the Mega Man continuity, period. Part of the reason for that is that, unlike Legends, Zero actually has a conclusive ending to it, which most of the other series that aren't named Battle Network don't have. And yeah, I brought up Legends specifically, because this is, why, let me work on it! I'm never gonna get over this. Okay, so, Zero, what's it like? I already told you, it's like X. Very similar. Getting the powers is pretty difficult, at least in the first game. And in fact, I would argue that the first initial game is probably the hardest out of all four. I really actually find the first game a little mind-numbing to play on the GBA. Because of the GBA's limitations, there were some compromises here in terms of the gameplay. For one thing, there aren't enough buttons to put dashing as a face button. You don't have more than 2 buttons there. That makes sense. So dashing is now a shoulder button. Now some people actually prefer this. I hate it so much. I just can never get the feel for it. It probably didn't help at the time it was playing on a Game Boy Advance SP, and that thing is so narrow. Like, it actually cramps my hands to use the shoulder buttons on that thing. The original GBA was a bit better in this regard. Of course, the original GBA didn't have a backlit screen, or a frontlit screen, or any kind of lighting on the screen. You couldn't see anything. And this is really a big deal because even playing on a well-lit screen, like blown up on the collection, this is still a tough game. Playing it on a GBA and a tiny screen actually made the game a lot more difficult. It didn't help that Zero decided to do a thing that I just absolutely cannot deal with, which is, naturally, they brought back the life system in its full unspeakable glory. You get 3 chances unless you get an extra life in these levels. And this is not classic Mega Man. This stuff is real. This game will beat your face in and not care about you. Ever. This is such a major issue that the recent collection actually remedies this by allowing you to turn on checkpoints that basically will always reload no matter how many lives you've lost, which I think is the way to do it. Look. I've proven that I can get through the levels, okay? But I need time to actually learn the boss's pattern and figure out how to fight them. A lot of these bosses are not easy. Hapuya? Oh my god, Hapuya. If you don't know what he's doing, he will destroy you in a few seconds. Most of the Guardians will. Oh yes, the Guardians. These are the 4 Guardians of Neo Arcadia, and they are fully loyal and subservient to X. Well, copy X, who they think is X's will. And you can kind of tell that they were based more on X's design than almost any other Reploid. They look a lot like him. All of them have unique personalities and different boss fights. They are probably some of the harder bosses you'll fight in the games overall, though I do think that compared to all of them, Hapuya's probably the one that I find the most difficult, and he is a bit easier if you have his weakness, but like I said, getting different weaknesses is a pain in the butt in this game. That is, unless of course you get the element chips. Outside of the powers you can get from bosses, which like I said is so difficult that you probably won't even do it on your first playthrough, you do get element chips. And the element chips can be used to do weaknesses on bosses. Some bosses don't have weaknesses at all, I'll tell you that, but the other ones do. You have fire, ice, and electric. It's pretty standard, but you can always switch between them, and they basically empower your regular attacks with these elements. So you can take advantage of weaknesses against certain bosses if you can figure them out. This does make the game a bit easier, but a big problem I have with the original Zero is that it's never clear exactly who you're going to be fighting, ever, in any situation. The mission menu is different from almost any other Mega Man game in existence. You know how it's been standard so far that for the mission list, when you choose which order you take the missions in, you have a little picture of who you're going to be fighting. Even if the name's not there, you usually know who the boss is going to be. But a big point of interest when it comes to the first Zero game especially, is that the goal isn't necessarily to fight a boss, is to do a task for the Resistance. This could be something like rescuing a downed aircraft crew or freeing prisoners. The point is that, generally speaking, the goal of each mission is not to destroy a boss. It just so happens that each mission has a boss Reploid there for you to fight. But because there's no picture of them, you don't actually have any idea, first playthrough, who that boss is going to be. And this is a major problem, at least in terms of the ease of play, because not only do you not know if you'll be getting one of the element chips from these fights, you also don't know whether you have the right one late game, because you don't know who you're going to be fighting. It's only until you manage to get them all, and it's possible to not have them all until the very last mission of the game, where all of a sudden things will get a bit easier, and you'll start to understand what's going on. And on the surface, I don't necessarily consider this a fault with the game. It's just something to note that it doesn't really work exactly like you might be expecting from a Mega Man X game, or a Mega Man Classic game, or any other Mega Man game. There are some differences. There was clear intention to make this feel a bit more realistic in terms of its style. You're doing like actual jobs for like an actual Resistance, things that Zero would do. He wasn't just woken up to fight a bunch of bosses and then, you know, kill the final big bad guy. He was woken up to actually help the Resistance, and that's what you're doing. It's just inconvenient that you're always impeded by an actual boss that you actually have to fight. Oh, there's also Cyber Elves, which are a thing in this universe. They're basically Reploid AIs that have been turned into free data. They can just fly around, and they're smart, and they can talk. The Cyber Elves are actually used to buff Zero, generally speaking. There are a few exceptions, some are part of the main plot, but the ones you can use are used to buff Zero. This can be anything as simple as replenishing health a la an E-Tank, or they're also permanent buffs, making Zero faster or stronger, or anything like that. In addition, Zero levels up his weapons as he fights. Initially, you don't really have very strong fighting style. In fact, the Z-Saber only has one swing because Zero is totally out of practice. He's been asleep for over a century. But the more you use the weapons, the better he gets them. And I actually really like this idea. It rewards you for using the weapons, and Zero gets better at them the more you utilize them. It gets a bonus for weapon preference. So if you are like me and prefer the Saber all the time, you're gonna level up the Saber very fast, and Zero's gonna get better with it. It feels real. It makes sense, and I really respect the idea. Naturally, you will eventually go to Neo Arcadia and go through a boss rush and fight Copy X and blow him to smithereens. But is this a good game? Oh, absolutely. It's a great first step. Little rough around the edges in my opinion, and like I said, this is by far the hardest one in the entire series, but it's still a lot of fun. And it's definitely a good treat for older fans, I think, who want a good challenge out of the Mega Man games. Whereas I think Classic should be more geared towards getting young fans on board, Zero clearly had older veterans in mind whenever it was designed. This is not an easy game to pick up and play, because you will get your butt kicked. Repeatedly. Forever. That's just the way the game is. But, if that's what you want, it's very good at doing that. As for Zero 2, well, for the most part, it's more of the same. The one thing that drove me crazy about this game, and this is something that would be remedied later, but Zero has to level up all his weapons again. Now, the new weapons you get, which you do get new weapons, I understand. that makes sense. He hasn't used those before. But I have been using the saber and the gun this whole time. Why does Zero lose all the practice I had? I don't understand. The only logical explanation is in the beginning of this game, Zero totally conks out and almost dies. That's all I got. I don't get it. Also, the Guardians in this game really become so freaking thirsty for Zero. Like, especially Leviathan. I can't tell if she wants to bang him or kill him. She's one of those characters. And all the Guardians are like, no one can destroy Zero but me. I must fight him. Because Zero is so strong and they can't beat him. It's actually hysterical. Anyway, Copy X is dead, but Neo Arcadia is still a thing. So now you get a new commander by the name of El Piso who's running around and commanding the resistance, whereas CL is more focused on research. CL has this interesting idea where if she solves the global energy crisis, she'll be able to give it to Neo Arcadia as a peace offering, and it'll help end the war. That's really sweet, but if they receive this energy source from you, they'll probably just use it to murder you all. I don't want to, like, you know, ruin CL's day because I think her heart's in the right place, but El Piso's whole point here is that, yo, they have given no inclination that they want to make peace with us. They just want to kill us. I mean, as horrific as war can be and as bad as the situation is, and as much as I commend CL for wanting to end it all, he's probably right. Probably right. Now, that's not to say El Piso is not made of flaws, because Lord knows he is. He's way overconfident, gets most of his men killed, and then as a direct result of that, goes completely insane and basically tries to cause the apocalypse. That's good. Anyway, gameplay is pretty much like I said. They added some more upgrades for Zero. You can do a form change in this game, which changes Zero's color and gives him a unique benefit. It works, but I just can't help but not be able to deal with Zero changing color. That was always a Mega Man X thing, or Mega Man Classic for that matter. Zero doing it, I just, like, if Zero's not red or black, he just doesn't look like Zero to me anymore. Is that just me? Is it just bothering me? I don't get it. Like, maybe if these were, like, actual armors that really altered his appearance, I might be down for it, since Zero has basically never had a proper armor before, at least in the main series. But they literally just changed his color. And, you know, graphical limitation of the GBA, okay, fine. But again, I just don't really care for them, if I'm being completely honest. It's not bad, but I don't usually use them if I'm being real. Maybe I'm just too focused on aesthetics. Oh yeah, when it comes to these games, I have not discussed the music or the graphics so far, but I didn't think I had to. First of all, the music is excellent. I thought that was clear. And the graphics are excellent for GBA standards. Okay, good talk. There's no drastic shift between visuals overall throughout the course of the games. The only thing distinctive, I would say, is the art style, which has sort of a chibi look to it. It's not full-tier anime chibi, but it's definitely very, very close. I think that might put some people off, thinking maybe this game is for young kids because of the, you know, big anime eyes we got going on, but no. Zero 2 is pretty difficult as well, though there's a lot of quality of life changes here, and it's not nearly as hard as the first one was. To begin with, you don't actually need to turn on the checkpoint system in the collection now, because the checkpoints work like they should in Zero 2 and in all the games from here on out. Thank you for that, because that was unreasonable. Also, for the missions, they make it clear as to who you're going to be fighting every time, so you can plan a little bit better in terms of what you're going to be dealing with, and the order you want to take things on. And like I said, for the most part, I feel like Zero 2 is more of the same, but more ironed out, streamlined, and made a little bit easier. It doesn't destroy you like the first game does, not nearly as badly anyway. It helps that some of the bosses, like the Guardians, have very similar, if not the same, patterns from the first game. So if you beat them in the first game, I will guarantee you'll beat them in the second game. You know exactly what they're going to be doing. I think they might each have 1 or 2 new moves added. Maybe. Though to be fair, when you fight them the second time, they transform, and that gets a little crazy. But I think they're actually easier when they transform. Is that just me? I don't know. I thought they were way harder when they were smaller. I think they were harder to hit then. Now they're big, and it's like, oh no, I'm so powerful. Like, yeah, but now I can hit you really easily. And I already know your weakness by now. Oh, yes, there's one thing I'm gonna mention, and I'm gonna stop talking about this as we go, because 2 and 3, okay, so the elves in each game, I swear, every single time they have no idea what to do with them. Like, they're there, and they serve the same function, but they never seem to work exactly the same. Each game has a different take on how this system is supposed to work. I don't know why that is, but yeah. This time, they're more just like items, and they don't generally give permanent buffs like in the first game. They just give temporary stuff, and you can equip them, and they won't be gone forever. If you unequip them, they won't do the thing anyway. 2 and 3 also work very similarly when it comes to the elves. There's slight differences, though, between the two. And then 4 went completely out the window with how they work. So we'll get to that. Anyway, but 0-2 is a really good game. It's one of my favorites in the overall series. So I would definitely recommend it. I would recommend all of them. I'll just say that right now. Start at the beginning. I mean, 1 is hard, but it's worth it for this story. The story is great. Anyway, moving forward to 0-3. For once, we don't have to level ourselves up anymore. This time, Zero starts with the ability to use his combos. So, thank you for that. Because, why didn't we do that already? I don't know. Element chips are back, boss lists are here. It's the same game again, except with a different story, different level design, different bosses for the most part, as well as an interesting idea to initially conclude the series. Originally, this series was supposed to be a trilogy. 4 wasn't supposed to exist. But I'll get to that later. You're introduced to the puppet master behind this entire thing, Dr. Wheel, who's been responsible for everything going on, and he has a new super robot, Omega, and he's gonna use it to conquer the world! And by conquer, I mean destroy. Wheel is arguably the most evil, heartless villain that we have ever seen in Mega Man, in any canon, in any universe, ever. Usually, you can kind of understand, or at least recognize where the villains are coming from. Wily was driven to evil by jealousy. His jealousy over Dr. Light and his constant losses to Mega Man as a result of that. This, of course, led Wily to create Zero and the Maverick virus, which resulted in Sigma. Sigma was driven to evil by a virus, so it's arguable that it was never really his fault. The virus just skewed his AI logic, like he didn't really know fully, he wasn't all there. But now we're up to Wheel, and Wheel is just unspeakably horrible. Just the worst. Just so... wow, there's no justification for anything he's doing. He's just... We never really get a villain like this in the series, because even Wily in the classic series has some more development so you can kind of understand why he is the way he is. With Wheel, there's a lot we don't know. And I'm gonna bring this up and without spoiling anything, because there are some reasons why people think that this is the case, but I'm gonna clear that up right now. Some people think that Dr. Wile, or Wheel, I don't know how you say it to be honest, is Dr. Wily. Partially because of the similar name, partially because there are some plot reasons why he has access to knowledge that only Wily should know. Which I get. A couple things about that. To begin with, Keiji Inafune straight up said Dr. Wheel is not Wily. Period. End of story. That's... the man himself said no, that's not the case. Following that, his original name is not Wheel or Wile. Again, I don't know how you say it. It's Dr. Vile. Now the reason why this was changed in America is that another character from X was named Vile. His name is not Vile in Japan. Localization. Just, ugh. It's not unreasonable to think that a genius of Wile's caliber could figure out how to get a old robot design like Omega to actually obey him, which was Omega's original problem. He was on a team specifically studying an old robot, I'll point out, and that robot's AI structure. If anybody in the future could figure this stuff out, it's him. So I don't think it's unreasonable that Wile is a different character, and as a writer, I vastly prefer that. There's only so much you can credit Wily with causing before it just becomes ridiculous. Like, how far in the future is he gonna affect the world? He couldn't have planned for everything. The virus is one thing, but beyond that, I don't think that he would have been able to stretch his influence that far. And the irony is, as you all know by now, he made Zero. So technically speaking, he is the only reason why there is a savior left to protect the world, because X at this point is not in any position to help anyone. Zero 3 is really good and has an awesome finale to an awesome series, but like I said, this isn't the final game in the series. Not at all. We have Zero 4. Now the reason why Zero 4 happened is that, I'll just tell you, at the end of 3, you don't actually kill Weil. He's still in charge of Neo Arcadia. So this game is about stopping him there and doing all of that. There's a lot of things missing from 4, I feel. The Guardians kind of got killed off screen at the end of 3, and it's like, that seems lame. I feel like they should have had more of an epitaph than that, you know? But there are a lot of things I like about 4. You actually get some development on the interaction between Reploids and humans, which will lead into the overall universe of ZX. Like the notion that Reploids and humans can actually fall in love and form relationships and couples. This is super relevant to Zero because for the entire series, CL has been head over heels for him. And it's arguable how he feels. Some people like to say that Zero doesn't return her feelings, but just because he doesn't say it doesn't mean he doesn't care. It's clear from a lot of his actions that he is super biased towards protecting CL compared to anybody else. She's the only one he ever frets over being in danger. She's also one of the only ones he'll really open up to if she tries to talk to him. And given Zero's history with women, X4, I can see why he might want to distance himself. That is, assuming he can even remember the events of X4, because remember, he also lost a lot of his memory. There's still some things he may not know about himself. It's not clear whether his memory ever really came back, or if he just learned a bunch of stuff secondhand about himself. Anyway, the big part of this game is just stopping Wheel from destroying the world, because that's literally what he's doing. And this is another reason why I don't think Wheel is Wily. Wily wanted to conquer the planet, not obliterate it. Wheel just seems hell-bent on killing everybody who isn't him. Which I don't think Wily ever even considered. I'm sure someone's gonna correct me in the comments because Lord knows I got this Twitter guy over here.
You should play Mega Man Soul. It's a fan game that's way harder than the actual game. Also, you should make it part of your review. Hashtag get good.
I hate him so much. Hate him so much. Like I said earlier, 4 also completely changed how the elves work. In this game, you get a single cyber elf that effectively can copy every other cyber elf, so you just feed that elf and make that specific elf better and have it follow you around and do whatever and stuff. It's more streamlined and easier to use, I guess, but yeah, I just don't think they ever figured out exactly how they wanted the elves to work, is what I'm trying to say. In addition, how you get the powers from the bosses is, well, it's a little more obvious to figure out, but it's so bizarre. Basically, there's a weather system in this game, where if you fight the bosses when they have the advantage, then you'll get their skill. And you can change the weather to give them the advantage to accomplish this task. Okay. I mean, they got rid of the element chips, so I guess you kind of have to get the boss's powers if you want any weaknesses at all. Half the time you're going to do this accidentally. It's probably the easiest game to get the powers in, as long as you're willing to deal with a really tough boss fight, which all of them get a lot harder whenever you give them a weather advantage. Even their stages change, which is actually kind of cool, but it's so mystified that you can just change the weather. Like, that's just a thing we can do. I mean, even in the context of this universe, that's so weird. Especially when you're doing it for the sake of good. Usually, like, a weather machine is something a villain would use, but here we are, just like, oh, let's just change the weather. Yeah, we can do that. That's normal. Anyway, 4 is great. It has a really solid conclusion overall to the series, and I think it's a really satisfying game to play ultimately, just to get that finale. The Zero games are all great. I would recommend them. They're definitely weird and have some interesting choices, but they're similar enough to X that I think fans of X would love it, but different enough to give you a new, you know, interpretation of the overall gameplay style, a new feeling, a new enjoyment factor. It deserves to be its own series, and it's such a well-written and interesting story that I think any fan of X should absolutely play through the Zero games. Now before we finish, I'm going to tack on the ZX games at the end of this. Because, well, there's two reasons. Besides X, ZX has the closest ties, at least in terms of the overall timeline, with Zero, although they do take place hundreds of years after Zero. Following that, there's only 2 games in the ZX series, so I think dedicating an entire video to just these 2 would be a little silly, and to be brutally honest, I don't have that much to say about them. From a gameplay perspective, they're remarkably similar to the Zero games. It's just that they're DS games as opposed to GBA games. So their visuals are a bit better, and we can finally put the dash button on a face button like I've been wanting to this entire time. Though these games are very distinctive. Their plots are, much like the Zero games, much more front and center. There's a big story element to these games, and there's even anime cutscenes, which are pretty cool. The overall design for the characters is a very similar style to Zero, and for the first time in a main series Mega Man game anyway, you get to play as a female character. You can choose between a male or female character from the start. This is huge, actually. I think they should do this more. Now you may be wondering, well, how does that work? Do these characters just miraculously have the powers of X or Zero or Mega Man, or what's going on here? Alright, so in ZX, basically, and this was kind of hinted at before, Reploids and humans, the difference between the two is practically non-existent. They're basically all the same thing now. So everyone has the ability to interact with cyber stuff. It's just a thing that happens. Certain people have the ability to interact with what's called biometal. Biometals are kind of like elves in that they're cyber constructs of former Reploids, many of which you're going to recognize, such as Cybermetal Z and Cybermetal X. In the beginning of the game, you wind up being able to merge with both Z and X at the same time, becoming Mega Man ZX. Everybody in this game who's capable of merging with a biometal, what's called a Mega Merge. Of course, in Japanese, it's called Rock On, which I think is way more awesome of a take on it, but, you know, we don't call him Rock Man here, we call him Mega Man, so Mega Merge it is. But anybody who can do this is called a Mega Man. The plot is about stopping Biometal W. You get one guess as to who that is. And no, it's not Wily, don't say that, from influencing the others and taking over the world. Also, the game's style is Metroidvania. No, seriously, this is an open-ended wandering quest where you can find different power-ups and go to different areas at your leisure, just like with Metroid, or just like with the more recent Castlevania games. The side-scrolling element is there, and the gameplay is very similar to Zero, but the exploration and adventuring element of a Metroidvania game is thrown on top of it. I am actually completely shocked that it took them as long as it did to do this kind of game in the style of Mega Man, because it kind of takes really well to it overall with the X gameplay, if I'm being real. There's just one major hiccup with this game. The map. The map is well, it's this, and I'm not even sure you could call this a map. Like, okay, it tells you what certain areas are called, when you're in those areas, and that it attaches to the other areas, but beyond that, you get no direction. And it's kind of a pain to navigate that way. There actually exist fan maps online to remedy this issue, because I honestly think it's a major problem when it comes to looking around the game. It's so easy to get turned around. It doesn't help that every area is named after a letter, but none of those letters seem to synergize with, like, the order of the alphabet at all. Like, they're just thrown on there just willy-nilly, like, this letter goes next to that one, right? They're close in the, I don't even care, it's whatever. Like, it's just so confusing. Beyond that, though, this is a great game. This is a ton of fun, and I actually recommend it if you haven't given it a try. If you like the Zero games, you'll probably like the ZX games. You get more biometals as you play, too, so you can take on different forms beyond just the ZX biometal. My only other complaint is that there's no way to take on a form that's just Biometal Z or just Biometal X. Past the point where you figure out that you can merge with both of them at once, you will always take on Biometal ZX. Which is annoying because you play the first part of the game as just Biometal X, so it's not like they didn't have at least that one established. I would have preferred it if they at least gave you the option. I get the point of the title is the ZX to use both, but Still, it would have been nice to have the choice. Following that, we have Mega Man ZX Advent, a direct sequel to Mega Man ZX. They ironed out a lot of the issues from the first game with this one, but added a few more issues, I think, in some ways. To begin with, the map system is leaps and bounds better. It's actually, like, functional and tells you what to do. Problem: the game is worse at telling you what to do. In the first game, they did a really great job of always telling you exactly where to go and what to do. This game's a little more vague, so you have to do some wandering to figure it out. It's like they really wanted to make sure the player didn't always know how to follow the linear path, so they had to look around. And I understand that to a degree. It is a Metroidvania game, but it still doesn't seem to do a great job of giving any kind of sense of direction. There are times in the game where they straight up just don't tell you where to go. Like, could you at least tell me to go to the ice zone? I don't need to know where the ice zone is. I don't need to know what direction it's in. I don't even need to know what it's next to. I just need to know that's what I'm looking for. Okay, but they don't tell you that. So it can be kind of mind-numbing sometimes, but if you're into wandering and the game is fun, it plays just like the Zero and ZX game, I mean, that's fine. I also think they got just a little carried away with the powers in this game, because in this game you don't control the character who's responsible for Biometal ZX. You control a new character, again, boy or girl. They have different backstories this time, which is nice, but they get Biometal A. A is clearly Axel from X. There's no question in my mind. This is supposed to be Axel. Part of that reasoning is that he's called A, he sounds like Axel, but the big issue here is that the whole point of Biometal A is that you can copy any other Biometal or Reploid genetic structure and use their power. You literally morph into the bosses you defeat, just like Axel was able to do. So this is basically just a copy chip from XA, except it's Axel. So, you know, but that's the whole point. Basically, the idea is now you can play as a different character, but still get the abilities of the other Biometals without actually having those Biometals, since they're in possession of other characters at this point. The plot is still about stopping Model W, but you get more of a backstory regarding how the Biometals were even created, who's responsible for them, and why. I'm not going to spoil it like I said, because I don't want to ruin everything about these games. These stories are too intense, and a major part of playing the games for me to ruin it for you, but I will say this game gets really interesting. It also has voice acting, which is actually really good, as well as those anime cutscenes like I told you about before. They look really nice, at least on the collection, though I can't imagine they'd look that great on a DS screen. They definitely look better now. But like I said, they got a little carried away with the powers because there are just so many powers you copy. You have to use them, and it gets a little overwhelming sometimes. They let you use the touchscreen to switch between them, which is nice, that helps a little bit, but even at that, there's just so many to keep track of, and half the time you don't even use them for anything but specific platforming segments. Like, I would never turn into Cactus Flower here to fight anyone. I would never do that. He's the worst when it comes to combat. There are other options too that you can use, but like the initial ice one you get can't even be used on land at all. Like, at least when I use Biometal L Leviathan from the first game, Biometal L can be used on land. You probably shouldn't. Not great on land, but you could do it. This one just flops around, which is funny, and I kind of appreciate that detail, but still, it's just, you get so many by the end of the game that it's so hard to keep track of, and by the end, you're probably using the copies of the actual Biometals, not the bosses you've defeated, because the weakness system is very limited in this game. You have so many options here, but it's still just down to fire, ice, and electric. Those are the three elements. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter where that's coming from, just use the most effective choice, which I promise you will probably be one of the Biometal copies you're using, not the Reploid bosses. Still, Advent is a great and underappreciated game. In fact, both ZX games are super underappreciated. So if you can get a hold of them in their original forms or on the Zero ZX collection, I would actually recommend giving them a try, especially if you're a fan of Metroidvania. It's a Mega Man game, but done in the style of Metroidvania. If that's what you're looking for, that sounds cool to you, I definitely would give these a shot. I had so much fun with them. The music's great, the visuals are great, the stories are interesting, and yeah, there's some hiccups here and there. They're not perfect, but they're still a lot of fun. So definitely give them a try.
That you didn't know Zero was you wouldn't know that unless you played all the games like me, and I beat them with just my nipples.
I'm going to kill you one day, Twitter. all of it, the whole thing. But I'm not going to do it this time because the last time I got a power that I don't know how to use, or the will to use anyway, and I just don't trust what kind of toxic nonsense I'm going to have to get from murdering him. So he gets to live for today. Okay? But next time, we're going to jump into Battle Network. Till then, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.